put a new floor mat up there and I had half my foot on, half my foot off of it. It wasn't going to work standing on it right there. So anyway, good to see everyone. I guess we're probably going to have some late arrivers anytime you got, I call it potluck instead of potluck, but anytime you have potluck dinner, people are going to be, so anyway, people are going to be arriving a little bit late. So I know that's where my family is right now. They're dragging. So me and Grady bailed on them. You got everything going up there, Grady? Good job. So, all right then. If you have your Bible, turn to 2 Kings chapter number 18. 2 Kings chapter number 18. We're going to continue on with Hezekiah right here. And been enjoying my study on Hezekiah. And so 2 Kings chapter number 18, we'll try and pick up where we left off last week in verse number 26. Then said Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna, and Joah, and unto Rabshakeh, speak, I pray thee, to thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it. And talk not with us in the Jews' language, in the ears of the people that are on the wall. But Rabshakeh said unto them, hath my master sent me to thy master, and to thee, to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall, that they may eat their own dung, and drink their own piss with you? Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language, and spake, saying, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you out of his hand. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us, and this city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, make an agreement with me, buy a present, and come out to me, and then eat ye every man of his own vine, and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one the waters of his cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of oil olive and of honey, that ye may live and not die. And hearken not unto Hezekiah when he persuadeth you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. Hath any of the gods of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and of Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Iva? Have they delivered Samaria out of mine hand? Who are they among all the gods of the countries that have delivered their country out of mine hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of mine hand? But the people held their peace and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was saying, answer him not a word, or answer him not. Then came Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder, to Hezekiah with their clothes rent, and told him the words of Rabshakeh. Now, again, in review, we know that Hezekiah was king for about 14 years whenever Sennacherib decided he was going to come up to Jerusalem. And we looked in Isaiah where we saw that God called Judah a hypocritical nation, and that he was going to allow the Assyrians to come up and do a work on them. And we know from Isaiah that the Assyrians were going to decide that it wasn't just God that was doing it, it was them in their own power, and they were going to go too far. And so we looked at the first time we were looking at it, we were looking at how that Hezekiah had taken some of his treasure, and he went into the house of God, and he pulled the gold off the doors and everything, and how he tried to pay him off to not come up and attack. And how that it was in vain. He just all he did was really wasted his money. And we spoke last week, and I mentioned how that, and Brother Croft come up to me after service, but how that it was basically a trick on Sennacherib's part, because when he told him how much he would take, He told him how much he'd take. He took so much that there was no way for Hezekiah to go buy help from anyone else, because he'd emptied out his treasury, and he was actually pulling off gold off the house of the Lord just to get enough money to pay him off the first time. So there's no way he's going to go out and get someone else to help him. And so then, it doesn't even appear that it slowed him down. He paid him off. He did exactly what he asked for. Doesn't even really appear that it even slowed him down. And so then Rabshakeh shows up, and he shows up not just by himself. He doesn't just show up with a letter. He doesn't just show up knocking on the door saying, "Hey, I got a message from Sennacherib." No, he shows up with a great army behind him. He shows up in full force, and his full force was basically, I want to get the people to surrender. Hezekiah is probably not going to want to surrender, but I'm going to get the people where the people's hearts turn and say, look, there's no reason to fight. We can't fight. They're too big. They're too many. They're too great an army. We're not going to be able to fight them. And so if you remember last week, we looked over and we listened to what he started to say, and some of the stuff that he was saying was true. But, I think I saw somewhere on a sign somewhere that, every lie has just a little bit of the truth mixed in with it. It's just believable enough. And so, but some of the stuff that he said was true. Again, like I said, we read over in Isaiah where God did say he was going to send the Assyrians to that hypocritical nation. But he goes too far, and this is what in today's lesson, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see that he goes too far, and he just pushes it too far, and he does exactly what God said he was going to do. And so when you get to verse number 26, that here Eliakim and Shebna and Joah were sitting there, and they're like, look, okay, here's the deal. You need to just be speaking to us. We're the representatives for Hezekiah. You need to speak to us, and you need to speak to us in the Syrian language, not the Jews' language. Quit trying, because they understood what he was doing. He was trying to intimidate. He was trying to make all the men that are sitting on the wall feel like, hey, look, we're in trouble here, and we're not going to be able to fight these guys. We're going to lose this battle, because listen to the words. Listen to the words that he's speaking. Listen to what he's saying, and they were going to be intimidated and say, let's just not fight at all. And so they said, hey, speak to us in the Syrian language, for we understand it. And so that was just, saying sick him to a bulldog, because that's who Rabshakeh was. He was a bulldog, and so he said, you know what I'm saying is working. What I'm doing is working. These guys are not comfortable with what I'm saying. If they're not comfortable, that means that these men sitting on the wall are not comfortable either. So I'm not gonna speak to them in the Syrian language. I'm gonna be even more boastful. I'm going to be even more braggadocious. I'm going to build up the king of Assyria. I'm going to build up his army. I'm going to build him up that much more to make them more likely to want to quit. And so in verse number 27, but Rabshakeh said unto them, hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall? He said, look, he said, I knew what Hezekiah was going to want to do. I knew Hezekiah was just going to want to have us a little private conference where I'm just speaking to a few of you guys. But no, that's not what Sennacherib wanted us to do. He wanted us to have you guys intimidated. He wanted me to speak to these men so that these men understand. And again, Sennacherib's goal was for those men to get the feeling and put fear in their hearts to say, hey, we have no hope. We have no hope. There's no way to be delivered from this army. I mean, look at us. And he told them, if you remember, he told them right there that he would give them in verse number 23. He said, now therefore I pray thee, give thee pledges to my lord of the king of Syria, and I will deliver thee 2,000 horses, if thou be able to on thy part to set riders upon them. He knew that Judah was in a weakened state. He knew that Judah was in a weakened state. There was not millions of people. There was not this huge, massive army. And so he understood that, and so he threw it in their face time and time again. He said, I'll give you 2,000 horses if you can find 2,000 men that'll sit on them. I don't even think you got 2,000 men to fight. Look behind me. Look behind me. Look at this great army behind me. I'm willing to give you 2,000 horses, but you don't have the men to sit on them. How are you going to fight this great army that's sitting behind me? And so he was throwing it in their face. And so, like I said, when they're like, hey, speak to us in the Syrian language, he's like, oh, no, what I'm doing is working. I can see on the faces of the men that are sitting on the wall that it's working. And so not only am I going to go this far, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to say everything that comes to mind. And so he tells them right there, he said that they may eat their own dung and drink their own piss with you. He said, look, he said, these men are going to thirst to death. These men are going to starve to death with you. Okay, you're not protecting them by not letting them hear what I have to say, because they need to understand that we're going to surround this city. We're going to close this city off, and you're not going to have any water, which if you look in 2 Chronicles chapter number 32, this is actually something Hezekiah did that he didn't understand, that Rabshakeh didn't understand. In verse number 1 says, after these things, and the establishment thereof, Sennacherib king of Syria came and entered into Judah and encamped against the fenced cities and thought to win them for himself. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and with his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together, who stopped all the fountains and the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, why should the king of Assyria come to find much water? Also he strengthened himself and built up the wall that was broken and raised it up to the towers, and another wall without, and repaired Millo in the city of David, and made darts and shields in abundance. And he set captains of war over the people, and gathered them together to him in the street of the gate of the city, and spake comfortably to them, saying, be strong and courageous, be not afraid nor dismayed for the king of Assyria, nor for all the multitude that is with him, for there be more with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people rested themselves upon the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. So you see that it was Hezekiah who'd stopped the waters up. It was Hezekiah who'd stopped the waters up. But here is Rabshakeh saying, hey, look, you guys are going to starve. You guys are going to be so hungry that this is what you're going to want to eat to survive. You guys are going to be so thirsty that this is what you're going to do to survive. And so he's like, he wanted to throw it in their face and intimidate them. Everything about this was intimidation. And how many times, if you think about this, again, bringing it into our realm, how many times have we allowed the devil to speak to us, not in an audible voice, but you understand, speak to us and have us intimidated so that our faith is shaken in God, and we're looking at physical and present circumstances, and we get our faith shaken. And we let him talk us into doing something that we know we ought not to. Why? I don't understand. It's a sad thing to me, but if you talk to people very much, you'll find that they believe the devil much more than they believe God. They trust the devil. I mean, the devil says something to them, and they take it as gospel. But God says, I just don't know. I don't know if God's going to get me through this one. Well, why not? Why not? He's always got you through before. He's going to get you through again. He promised he would, didn't he? And so here is Rabshakeh, and he's speaking not just to the ambassadors from Hezekiah, but he's speaking to the men in the wall to intimidate them. And then he gets to verse number 28. It says, then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice. He didn't just want the people that were close to him. He wanted anyone that was listening, anyone that had an ear, he wanted them to hear. He cried, and again, it says, in the Jews' language. Again, this was not just for the ambassadors. This was for everyone. And he spake, saying, hear the word of the great king. So now here he is, he's exulting, because I almost feel like Sennacherib was a god to Rabshakeh. And so now he's exalting Sennacherib, saying, "Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria." And so in his mind, most likely he was just throwing shade at Hezekiah, but he was also throwing shade at God when he was throwing shade at Hezekiah. And so he's exalting this king to make him out to be someone that he's just not. I mean, yes, was he a conqueror? Yes, was he taking over cities? Yes, was he defeating foes? But remember, it was God. It was God that allowed him to do what he was doing. It was God that was allowing him to do what he was doing. I remember my father-in-law had an example, Brad, I'm sure you heard it, where he told, I think it was Leslie, he said, you know, all life's dragons are paper dragons, except for the ones that God uses, and he's only going to take what he wants to take. And so you understand that, hey, you know, things look bad at times. Things look terrible at times. But as long as your faith is in God and you trust in God, it doesn't matter what the people are saying. It doesn't matter what the devil's saying. It doesn't matter what anybody says. It's what God says. And God is only going to allow them to take as much as he wants them to take. And so here he said, look, the great king, the king of Assyria, and so he says in verse number 30, "Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord." So again, like I said, God told him in Isaiah that he was going to go too far. And here he goes too far. He said, don't you let Hezekiah, don't you let him, I just read it there in Chronicles that the people rested in the words of Hezekiah. They rested in those words. Why? Because Hezekiah had proved himself. It wasn't just, hey, Hezekiah found God at this moment in his life when he thought he was going to lose his kingdom. Hezekiah, from day one, when he walked in, when he became king, said, hey, look, there's a new sheriff in town. We're going to do things different. We're going to go back to serving God. We're going to serve God. He rebuilt the temple and restored he restored worshiping or observing the Passover. And you understand, here we're 14 years into his reign right here, and God had blessed him and prospered him. And so here, these people have got a 14-year track record of watching Hezekiah and understanding that, hey, we talked about it last week, it's not just, hey, this is Hezekiah's life insurance policy. This is not a life insurance policy with Hezekiah. This is a lifestyle for Hezekiah. Hezekiah has proved for 14 years that he serves the God of Israel. He loves God. He loves Jehovah and serves him, and God has blessed him because of that. And so whenever Rabshakeh right here says this, he doesn't understand. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord. The Lord will surely deliver us, and the city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. If you remember, I think it was earlier where he said, verse number 22, but if ye say unto me, we trust in the Lord our God, is not that he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away? Again, he didn't understand. He didn't understand that what Hezekiah did was a good thing. He comes from a place where they worship God, and they can build their little idol and make they don't worship the true God, they worship their gods, and they worship them anywhere. And they just make their little carved out thing, and they bow down and worship it. And so he threw it up to Judah like, hey, this is a bad thing. But it was a good thing. God was pleased when Hezekiah took those high places down. God was pleased when he took those altars down. He wanted them to worship in that temple. He wanted them to come and set that worship back in order like it was supposed to. But Rabshakeh thought it was a bad thing. And so he said, don't you trust in Hezekiah? Don't you understand he's already led y'all astray? I mean, your God's got to be mad at you. Your God's mad at you because, hey, he took these things away. Instead of you just being able to bow down and worship your God anytime, he wants you to come down and worship in this one place. And so your God must be mad at you. My God would be mad at me if that's what happened. And he didn't understand. And so he's like, hey, he said, don't you let him because the Lord, again, you know, it's funny. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes, it drives me crazy, but sometimes lost people, they act like they know God, and usually they know, judge not that you be not judged. That they hadn't read anything else, but they read that one little section right there, and like, well, the Bible says, judge not. Like, well, what's the rest of that? What's the next about 2 verses say right after that? Well, I don't know, but the Bible says, judge not. And so here now he's saying, hey, the Lord, like, hey, you know, God has sent me down here to do this because Hezekiah has deceived you. And so he's like, the Lord will surely deliver us, and the city shall not be delivered to the hand of the king of Syria. He said, Hezekiah has deceived you if that's what he told you. If he told you that the Lord will deliver us, guess what? No, that's not true. He said, hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me. Now, again, anyone that knew what happened, anyone that was aware that what Hezekiah did, and again, like I said, it looked like it was a bad thing. It looked like it was a bad thing when Hezekiah said, you know, whatever you put on me, in verse number 14, I have offended, return from me that which thou puttest on me will I bear. It looked like it was a bad thing, Chris, whenever he had to go to the house of the Lord and start peeling them gold off them doors. But what that was, everyone that walked by that temple had to say, what is going on there? What is going on right there? What are we doing? Why are we taking that gold off them doors? Well, because the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, says he's coming up to take over Jerusalem right here, and he said, hey, if you'll pay me this much gold and this much silver, then I'll leave you alone. So what'd he do? He didn't hold up his end of the bargain. So now, whenever Rabshakeh says, hey, look, the king of Assyria wants to make a deal with you, who's going to believe him? Who's going to believe him? You know, I mean, he's already got a bad name. Why? Again, like I said, it looked like it was a bad thing when he was pulling that gold off of them doors. But now the people of Judah could look and say, hey, we can't trust this guy. He's offering us a deal. He's offering us a deal saying, hey, you know, I'll make your life pleasant for you. I'll let you live in peace until I come get you, which doesn't sound like a real good deal, just period, even if it was true. But anyway, I'll let you live in peace until I come get you and take you to my land. But guess what? He'd already proved himself to be a liar. He'd already shown himself to be a liar. He'd already shown himself that you couldn't trust him. He'd already shown himself that, hey, you know, just make a deal with me and I'll make it easy on you. And then he said, and then he turned right around and didn't hold up his end of the bargain. Everyone saw Hezekiah hold up his end of the bargain, much to their shame to see that gold being pulled off those doors. But now, like I said, a lot of times people mean things for evil, but God allows it to turn around and be for your good. And so even that was a terrible thing. And you look, and again, even I look when I read it, I'm like, Hezekiah, you're going to have to trust God eventually. Why not just trust him from the start? But here it says, hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Syria, make an agreement with me by a present. Come out, and then eat ye every man of his own vine, and every one of his fig tree. Drink ye every one the waters of his cistern. And so he's like, he said, if y'all come out, just bring a present, come out to me. We'll make a deal. We'll make a bargain. We'll sign a piece of paper. We had a little situation in our house. Grady, we were fixing to go on vacation, and Adrian said, Grady, if you do this right here, then whenever we go on vacation, I'll buy you some bait. And so he grabbed a piece of paper and he wrote it down. He said, sign this right here. Sign this piece of paper right here. And so we're fixing to go on vacation. And so he's like, I mean, that's all he's talked about. And he's like, look, I got the paper. I got the paper. You got to do it because I got the paper. And so here he's like, hey, look, he said, come on. He said, we'll make a deal. We'll make a bargain. I'll sign the paper. I'll put my name on it. Rabshakeh will sign his name on it saying it's going to be great for you. It's going to be so wonderful if you just give in and give up and give up your freedom. Don't worry about it because we're going to take care of you. And sometimes they make it sound so good. They make it sound so nice. It's like, what's the point of fighting? What's the point of resisting? We're not going to win anyway. And so wouldn't it be better to just make our bargain, make our deal with the devil? We'll make our deal with the devil, and then we make our deal. At least we can, live out in dignity. No, that's not what's going to happen. It's not what's going to happen at all. And so he said, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land. What? No, wait a second here. I mean, it's one thing if you're going to say, hey, you know what? If you just come out, we'll make a peace treaty and we'll give you what you want. But then we're going to get to live in our own land and eat of our own fig tree and drink of our own cistern. That's not terrible. But you mean you're going to take us all? You're going to take us all? You're going to make us all slaves? You're going to move us out of our place and make us slaves in your land? And he doesn't say slaves, but you understand that. I mean, that's what they're doing. You understand that's what you're doing. He said, until I come up and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of oil, olive, and of honey, that you may live and not die. There was the threat. It was in there. You just had to wait. You just had to wait long enough to get it. He said, look, if you don't make a deal with me, you're going to die. If you don't make this deal with me, you're going to die. And if you make a deal with me, then look, it's this land I'm going to take you to is going to be really nice. You're not going to really get to enjoy much of it, but the land's really nice. You'll walk around and you'll see other people enjoying of the fruit of the land, but you're really not going to get to it unless your master, whoever's taking care of you, has pity on you and lets you enjoy some of the crumbs that fall from his table. But listen, at least you're alive. At least you're alive. And honestly, truth be told, there are some things you just be like, you know what? No, I'd rather die. I'd just rather die. I'd just rather die. I'd just rather die than have to live with myself knowing that I just turned yellow and just gave up and said, you know what? It's just easier. We surrender. Here's my little white flag. I'm just waving the white flag. Hezekiah, appreciate all you done for us. The God of Hezekiah, we had a good 14-year run right here. It was a really nice 14-year run. It was really miserable before, whenever Ahaz was king, but now Hezekiah is king. We had a good 14-year run. But you know what? Let's just turn it over, and at least we can live and not die. That's what Rabshakeh wanted. That's what he was pushing for. That he was like, again, he was not speaking to those three ambassadors. He was speaking to the men on the wall. He was speaking to the men on the wall. He was speaking to the men on the wall that had families. Say, hey, look, you got a family. You got a family. You got to think about this. You got a family. Do you really want to be sitting there and watch your child starving to death? Do you really want to sit there and watch your wife starving to death? Or hey, if you'll just make a treaty with me, if you'll just come out and give me a present. Wonder what that present was. Wonder what that present was that he wanted. Wonder what he was asking. Wonder what he was really asking for in that present. You just give me a present. Wonder what that was. He's like, you give it to me, and then I'll do this for you, and you won't have to watch your children starve to death. You won't have to watch your wife starve to death. You won't have to make a decision over who eats the last morsel of bread. And so he says, that ye may live and not die, and hearken not unto Hezekiah. Again, he's trying to shake their faith in Hezekiah, but he's also trying to shake their faith in God while he's shaking their faith in Hezekiah. He said, and hearken not unto Hezekiah when he persuadeth you, saying the Lord will deliver us. So he's saying, hey, when he persuadeth you, whenever he's not just got you, told you, but he's convinced you. He's persuaded you. You were not really on that side until Hezekiah started talking. And as he started talking, he started persuading you. I mean, think about where you were. And some of them might have needed to be persuaded. Again, Ahaz was king before Hezekiah, and they had worshipped idols, and they had went to those high places, and some of them had been persuaded. And how many times had you seen someone that was not fully persuaded? They changed their lifestyle, but and if you think about it, here God said, "Hey, look, I'm sending the Assyrians to a hypocritical nation." So no doubt there were people there that were they were in church, but they weren't in church. They were doing what they were supposed to on the outside, but in their heart, they were not doing what they truly wanted to. So you understand that this was not just empty words that he was saying right here. He was speaking, and there were people listening. There were people hearing. There were people hearing saying, I just might ought to take that deal. Yeah, it's been a little bit better for the last 14 years. Life's been pretty good for us here. But you got to think. In the beginning of the chapter right here, in the beginning of the chapter, what happened? That they came and they took. They started taking those outskirt cities. Maybe Hezekiah doesn't really have the heart of God. Maybe God's not really going to protect us. And maybe we are on our own. If we're on our own, shouldn't we pick the winning side? And so he's like, hey, he said, he's persuaded you. He's persuaded you. He's enticed you with words. You know what's funny? Well, what do you think he was trying to do? That's the exact same thing he's doing. He's trying to persuade them. I didn't even know till I got in trouble at work what a microaggression was. So a lot of y'all probably don't even know what a microaggression was. But he wasn't doing microaggression. He was truly being aggressive in his words, with threatening, saying, "Hey, look, if you don't come out and make a deal with me, I hate it, but you're just gonna have to die. I hate it for you, but you're just going to have to die. Life could be so good if you would let me persuade you because of the king of Assyria, the great king of Assyria. He is going to take over this land, and don't let yourself be persuaded by Hezekiah, and trust in God, because God is not going to be able to protect you from the king of Assyria." And so he was trying to do exactly what he was telling them not to listen to Hezekiah. And so he said in verse number 33, again, like I said, he gets himself in trouble here because he starts comparing the gods of the lands that they'd conquered, to Jehovah. And so he says, have any of the gods of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? And that answer could be no. Why? Because they're not gods at all. They're just little g gods. They're just little idols that they've created with their own hand or in their own mind and dreamed up. And now they bow down and worship these little g gods, but they have nothing to give. You can pray and pray and pray to your little g God, and he's not hearing you. You can bow down all you want to. You can throw all your money you want to. You can take your kids and run them through the fire. You can do all that stuff to try and appease this God that's not even really mad at you. Why? Because he's not a God at all. And so he's like, hey, he said, none of these gods of the land, we went into Hamath and we went into Arpad, and they were praying to their God. And their God had nothing for the king of Assyria. We went into Sepharvaim and Hena and Iva, and they were praying to their God. They're praying, whatever the name of their God was. Hey, please deliver us from the king of Assyria. Please deliver us from the king of Assyria. And he didn't deliver them. Look what he says right here. Have they delivered Samaria out of mine hand? Now this starts getting closer to home. But what was the problem with Israel? We know what the problem with Israel was. They hadn't served God in so long, they didn't know what it was to truly serve God. They hadn't served God in so long. From the time Jeroboam brought them calves in, king after king after king after king after king served them calves, worshiped them calves. And they'd bring Baal worship in, and God would push that Baal worship back out, but they'd never deviate from worshiping them calves. And so you understand that he's saying, hey, look, even the God of Samaria, he didn't have anything for me. But there was a problem. They had, again, like I said, Israel hadn't served God in so long. They hadn't served God in so long that they did not have the protection. They did not have the protective hand of God. That's not who they were serving. They were bowing down to anything. They would bow down to Baal. They'd bow down to them golden calves. They'd bow down to anything. And so again, I'm sure he thought that's why he held it out for last. He's like, I'll drop this one on them. I'll drop the big bomb on them last. We'll drop the little missiles in, but then we'll drop the big bomb on them last. Be like, hey, look, it was kind of true. God didn't protect Israel. Why should we trust him to protect Judah? Because Judah was at least trying to serve God. Well, under Hezekiah, they were trying to serve God. They had made a turn and turned back to God. And so he said, who are they among all the gods of the countries that have delivered their country out of mine hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of mine hand? Got himself in trouble right here. Got himself in trouble. Again, look at what he says when I hear. Originally, he was talking for the king of Assyria. He was talking for Sennacherib, but now he goes into, I think it's first person. My father-in-law was also an Englishman. I'm not. But he's like, out of mine hand. He said, who are they among all the gods of the countries that have delivered their country out of mine hand? A few verses before, he's like, look, he said, y'all couldn't stand before the least in my master's army. Y'all couldn't stand before the least captain in my master's army. And now he's like, hey, look, those other countries and their gods that they were praying to, those gods could not deliver them from my hand. And he made it personal, Chris. He made it personal. And he challenged God. He challenged God. And again, like I said, God said, I'm going to send the Assyrians up to do this. But he also said the Assyrian, he's going to let it go to his head. He's going to let it go to his head, and he's going to go too far. And when he goes too far, I'm going to stop him. And he says again, he said that have delivered their country out of mine hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of mine hand. He said, I haven't been bothered by any of the other gods. I haven't been bothered by any of the other gods of the land, and I don't fear your God either. I don't fear your God. I don't believe in your God. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. If there's a fight between me and your God, I am going to win. That's what he told him. That's what he told them. Maybe in not so many words, but that's exactly what he was saying. He said, look, he said that the Lord should, he said, the country out of mine hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of mine hand. He said, look, y'all are already defeated. You're already defeated and you don't even know it. You're sitting up there on the wall and you're like, hey, we haven't surrendered yet. Guess what? You're already in mine hand. And you can go pray to your God all you want to. You can go bow down to your God all you want to. You can go say all the words you want to. You can burn however many sacrifices you want to burn. You can do anything you want to do. Anything you want to do. But I'm telling you, you're already in mine hand, and God's not big enough to take you out of my hand. And Chris, he signed his own death warrant right there. Signed his own. He made him a deal, but he didn't realize what he was signing right there. Signed his own. Why? Because he said, I am bigger than God. I am more powerful than God. You better trust in me and I'll let you live. You trust in God and you're not going to live because you're already in mine hand. I already own you. I already own you. You're already mine. And there is no hope for you unless you trust in me and not the Lord. And so in verse number 36 it says, but the people held their peace. I mean, you can imagine, surely there was someone in that crowd that wanted to stand up like David and say, hey, is there not a cause? Who is this? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Who is this Assyrian that just stood up and challenged our God? You know, there had to be someone in that crowd that had served God for the last 14 years and saw everything that God had done for them and said, hey, look, this guy's not right, and he's out of line. But Hezekiah told them before they ever came, said, look, he's going to, and I'm going to use a kid's story. It's the big bad wolf. He's going to huff, and he's going to puff, and he's going to threaten to blow our house down. And just don't even answer. Just don't even say a word. Just let him huff and puff and threaten, but he's not going to get us. And so he said, but the people held their peace and answered him not a word. For the king's commandment was saying, answer him not. Just don't even say anything. Look, I'm telling you, he's going to talk. He's going to talk a lot, but just don't say a word. Just don't say a word. And sometimes it's best not to say a word. Sometimes you want to, you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and you just get yourself in a mess. But you know what? God can defend himself. God can defend himself. In verse number 37, then came Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, the recorder, to Hezekiah with a clothes rent. It was serious. It was a serious thing. It wasn't a minor thing. They didn't take it like it was a joke. They understood it was a serious thing. They came with their clothes rent. And it says, and told him the words of Rabshakeh. And so they come to Hezekiah, and they come with their clothes rent, and I say, look, this is everything he had to say. This is, they had Asaph the recorder, or Joah, the son of Asaph the recorder. They had the recorder with him. He's just sitting there, just writing it down. Shouldn't have said that. Got the little highlighter out, said, look what he said right here. Can you believe he said that about God right here? But they came with their clothes rent. They came with their clothes rent because it was serious, and they came to him and said, look, these are the words. These are the words. And next week, Lord willing, we're going to get into chapter number 19 and see what Hezekiah has to do about it. Thank y'all.